Now, scaling through challenging periods and tackling inflation is every country's key goal, especially if you're an African country. Now, the outcry from Nigerians due to high cost of food items affecting all classes of people, particularly those who can barely afford 3 square meals per day, has been a constant dilemma for months. Some fear that this might be an unending challenge that will only get worse. Let's take a look at this report that was put together by our correspondent Chidima Ona.
This one 5,000 last price. Now so I buy a course from my 12. New one too, it cost past this audience. I'm telling you, sir. New year it cost past this audience. Why? For the whole Nigeria now, all Kogiam now come out. So make a look at the kind of go anywhere. You're too small, so that's too cost. Even New Year.
The endless circle of what to eat daily is every man's worry, a problem sometimes associated with indecisiveness. But for most Nigerians, it is a lack of money to purchase.
You can't even plan, to be honest. You can't, before we could make lists, you say, okay, for example, onions 200, tomato 300. Now you cannot do that because, yes, this price is not today's price. You can't make budgets for anything. You just buy as you see because at the end of the day, you won't eat the money. You have to buy the food.
Once or twice every month, the price of foodstuff increases. This frequent hike in food prices has affected the daily lives of ordinary Nigerians.
This one is sweet. Then they sell 3,000. Watermelon, at the selling 4,000 because you don't go high too much. I go buy 100 pieces, 300,000 naira. This one are cabbage. This cabbage at the selling, I go buy bagging 50,000 naira. That's Irish. Line be 250,000 for one bag for Irish potato. So everything now never come down a day up.
With several changes in economic conditions and inadequate government policies to combat the current cost of living, economists say that inflation is eating up the nation's roots.
Inflation in Nigeria, as I speak with you, is 33.94%, approximately 34%. The actual objective on inflation is 6 to 9%. Unfortunately, Nigeria has not been able to meet targets. Perhaps this would have led to hunger, deprivation, poverty in the land. Exchange rate in Nigeria, as I speak with you, it's very volatile. The goal of exchange rate is stability, but what we have in Nigeria is volatility. From 400, 700 that it was last year, right now it's 13 less than 1,500. It has gone to 1.9 within the last 1 year, gone back to 1.1, and it's oscillating. Nobody is sure as to what the exchange rate will be.
The outcry from Nigerians is a call to action for the government to take immediate measures to tackle the country's issues and ensure food security for all Nigerians. In Lagos for News Central, Chidima Ona.
Well, inflation crisis has gone on for a long time and it's obviously no joke. We're now joined by News Central's business desk editor, Nasir Agbalaya, who would help us make sense, if at all we can, of this situation. Thank you so much for joining us, Nasir.
It's great to be here, guys.
It's a pleasure to have you join us. What would you say is the major reason for the spike in food items? And would you say that supply chain distribution has affected the availability and affordability of food items?
You're quite right on all counts. Now, we all know that Nigeria has been battling with insecurity for some time, and that has not made things any better. All the food basket, the north, east, northwest, even the middle belt, farmers have not been able to go to the farms as they should have. Incidentally, climate change has made matters worse. Rains are not coming when they should, and even when they come, it is more than what it has been over time. That has given rise to flood. I mean, look at the facts. First, the farmers could not farm. Now, when they now go to their farms, the floods now devastate the little they have. Of course, that will impact on the output. Now, to make matters worse, the fact that the Naira has gone down, incidentally, the Ukraine-Russia war has not helped us also, because this part of the world is where we get many of our fertilizers. Yes, we make some here, but unfortunately, the Dangote refinery and others that should have eased this has not done well enough. We all know that the story behind that. Now, go back to these interesting factors. Now, last year when President Tinubu said that he has cancelled, he has ended subsidy, the price of diesel and everything hit the roof. And we do know that these farm products are transported from these agricultural areas down to the consuming areas via high-density trucks that are powered with diesel. And this also has not happened the way it should. And when they do get to buy diesel, it is at a different cost of what it was last year. It has quadrupled to an extent. Now, Dangote and some other refineries are trying to augment that, but supply chain disruption in that sector is also impeding that. So it's a multifaceted problem. And as it is now, until these problems are tackled head on, it won't change.
It's almost like everything is just working to cause problems, like you said, right? There's the problem of fuel price and supply. There's the problem of insecurity. There's the problem of even the elements of nature is also a problem. Climate change, and flood and everything, right? And we've gone beyond the era where we're talking about inflation like it's economics 101, and now you see it. I know that we've done at least 3 or 4 market surveys at the station here in New Central this year. And with every market survey we go with our cameras, the prices of goods increase. Now the challenge is also on the traders themselves, right? True. Because they cannot sell for less than what they are making. You know, so my question now is, what measures can they put in place? I was going to say, have they put in place? But what measures can they put in place to ensure that, prices are still minimal, that they can actually still sell and people can buy?
That's a very tough one. But the reality in the market, as we have seen it from what I have done, my research also, is that for big, say, producers, they have stuck to what economists call shrinkflation, where they keep what they are producing at a particular quantity, but the price, of course, still goes on. Various brands of dairy products, you can see it quite well, that the quantity you're buying is different. Even the beverages also, many of them have changed their bottles to smaller one, which they claim is still the same thing, but quite different. Now, for our agrarian farmers that bring in this food, they don't have much of a choice. Whatever they buy is what they sell. But those who can amongst them try to, say, change location to where it is possible to get a bit more supply from those ones who have not been able to produce adequately. It's just a matter of pushing your money to get what you want and trying to expect to get as much as you can, and before you go back to the market again. It's quite difficult for them, sincerely, but they're doing what they can. Even right now, what the government has promised about, say, removing tax from imported food should ease this. And for the 150 days, which they said that there won't be any tax, that means looking at the ember period that is coming up shortly, there should be more food. So prognosis-wise, let's say then there'll be more abundant of food, but it's still a 50-50. Let's not forget that climate change affects everybody on this continent. We are even a bit better off. Now, our brothers and sisters in East Africa and some part of Southern Africa who have been feeling the nasty effect of the El Nino, they are having it far worse. Countries like Zimbabwe, their farm products are even far less. They don't even have enough rain. We have a bit more than enough to even lead to flood. They have far less. It's not a matter of your mechanization, which we all need across Africa. They have something next to none. The weather is affecting them in a different way. And we look at it, we don't really use so much industrialization that, say, we don't have enough green gases, but because it's a global phenomenon, we are feeling the effects. It's a catch-22 question, which the solution for us is a bit far, as it is.
So speaking of solution, we have somewhat over time blamed the fluctuation in prices on so many different things. We blamed it on the dollar, we blamed it on the Central Bank of Nigeria, we blamed it on opportunistic vendors and stuff like that. But have we made any headways as to actually finding out why prices fluctuate? What is the most constant factor that affects the prices of, because if we say it's the dollar comes down, the prices still go up. Yeah. If we say that it's imports, everything is still not explaining why the prices are fluctuating. So have we made any headways when it comes to identifying what the actual problem is?
And while we're talking about fluctuation, in this case, I don't even think it's fluctuation. The prices just go up. They never come down. Actually, so they don't fluctuate.
No, it goes up by like 1,000, come back by 5 naira.
Exactly. So that's a major, she's actually right. That's a major challenge.
It is, and you're both spot on. Whatever goes up in Nigeria hardly comes down. It is still the human factor. Now, unfortunately, every trader goes to the market with the mindset of making a profit. That's the bottom line. That is why business are being done. But in this case, it has become a bit much more different. Now, in the 70s, 80s, there were things called the marketing boards that regulate buying and selling in a way. They give some sort of subsidy. Now, people then, farmers then, their job was just, you plant this, harvest it, come and sell. They buy and sell at a particular amount. They don't cheat the farmers, they don't cheat people. They act as the middleman. Now, removing that, going to a free market economy means that everyone is a willing buyer, willing seller. Whatever you bring to the market, people buy like that. So for that open market phenomenon is what we are experiencing now. Because whatever, say, Mr. A buys, Mr. A sells at his or, say, her whims, with the intention of making profit so that he can stay in business. Now, inflation is a reality. Another reality, like Blessing mentioned, is the fact that the dollar exchange rate has been incidentally ridiculous now. But look at the bright side. Our foreign reserves has been increasing. Now, this means that disparity between Naira dollar would reduce. So it will be some ease on the Naira, but it will not show immediately. Now, for it to show, this has to continue over time. It's not a matter of it happening just a week, 2 weeks. It has to be like a 2-3 month thing continuously. Now, a number of loans have come in. Nigeria has sold gold, has started selling gold. Wonderful. Now, if we can increase our crude oil export to, say, 2 billion from the paltry 1. Interesting, I don't want to go to that yet. But if you can, say, increase the amount of crude oil we sell to 2 million barrels a day and above, we won't be where we are right now. The Naira will be strong enough where we can buy fertilizer, we can trade. So with that cushion, the economy would be balanced. Of course, we all know that many of the companies leaving is because of this fluctuation. So the economy would be balanced. And of course, the price will be a bit more stable. So it's a larger thing that is affecting the everyday Nigerian. If the economy is balanced, this would be sorted.
So now you're saying, if the economy is balanced, this will be sorted. And this, of course, leads me to my next question. But before I go there, one thing that I know that I've come to learn is that every human being, after losing everything, the only thing we hold on to is hope. The hope that things will get better. The hope that the economy would improve, or you hope that Nigeria will get better. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot. Is there any chance at all? Do we have any forecast, any prediction that can tell us if, to start with, and then when the prices of particularly food will stabilize or decrease? Because that is the only hope that I think people are holding on to now, that someday, somehow, things will get better. And I have a very cute story about hope, by the way, from Greek mythology. We don't have time. I will tell you that story someday. But really, I think right now, that's the only thing that will give Nigerians hope. If they know that there's a time when food prices generally, but particularly food right now, would stabilize or would begin to decrease. Do we have any time frame?
This is a wonderful question. You are right. Really put you on the spot here. Now, yes, but it's a very cautious yes. Now, I have to delve back to what the government promised. I did what we're doing. They said that they are removing tax from imported food items to augment what has been produced locally. Yes, that gives a glimmer of hope of 150 days, rough plus or minus 3 to 4 months, moving into the ember period. So let's say around October, November, things could ease. It's a very big if. If that means our neighboring countries, Benin, Togo, they have enough to bring in for us. Talk about perishable goods. Your tomato and who knows, maybe possibly rice, staple in Nigeria, gari and some other things, and corn. If these can come in, it will affect not just what we eat, but even what we say for the poultry industry also will affect it. So by and large, that will help to crash down prices. When there's more supply, there's demand, but there's more supply to, say, exceed that demand, it will crash down price. That's just the basic thing. When supply truly exceeds demand, but it's a real big but. It has to happen, and we see it every day if it does happen. If it doesn't happen, we'll also see it. We all go to the markets. So it's just a realistic thing. It is not about theory. It's not about high-falutin mathematics. It's about supply and demand. If we can have more supply that truly satisfy Nigerians locally, then problem solved.
Okay, thank you very much, New Central's Business Desk Editor Nasir Agbalaya. And the summary of what you just said is even the hope is expensive. Because there are clauses there.
Exactly.
But we really do hope. We don't know how it's going to happen, but we're hoping that it will happen someday. And to be honest, it's not just the stability of the food prices and all. Everything is somehow right now.
It's very somehow.
Anyways, you're still watching Report Desk Africa. And when we come back, we're taking it to social rights, and seeing what is going on there as well. A big thank you to Nasir for joining us and sharing his thoughts on what's happening in Nigeria. But we're still staying in Nigeria, so don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. It's still Report Desk Africa, and we're nowhere near done. In case you're just joining us, you've missed a little, but you've not missed everything. Now we'll be going into another phase of it. In a political setting, peaceful protests are ways that citizens of a country express their dissatisfaction and disapproval of government ideas and actions. Now, this is a right backed by Constitution, which was allegedly infringed upon by the Nigerian government. In a recent ruling, the ECOWAS Court found the Nigerian government guilty of human rights violations during the October 2020 EndSARS protest, affirming allegations of excessive use of force against peaceful protesters and unlawful killings as well. We'll take a quick look at this report filed by News Central's correspondent, Adeshawa Odushoga.
It's been 4 years since the nationwide EndSARS protest, a movement against police brutality wrapped in a powerful expression of frustration by the citizens, especially the younger population, who demanded systemic change. The protest, which lasted 4 weeks, took a sad turn after a tragic event on October 20, 2020. The Nigerian government initially denied involvement in the shooting, but later acknowledged that soldiers were indeed present at the scene. By December 2021, 3 youth, including Obianuju Catherine, otherwise known as DJ Switch, and 2 others, brought a case before the ECOWAS Court against the Federal Republic of Nigeria to seek justice for themselves and those impacted by the violations. 3 years later, in its judgment, the ECOWAS Community Court of Justice found the federal government of Nigeria guilty of human rights abuses in its response to the protest.
The court awarded compensation 2 million naira each for the applicants when it found the Nigerian government in breach of its duty to protect the applicants from torture. It went ahead and added 2 million naira each for the applicants. So they were 2 million naira each at 5 different instances, meaning that each of the applicants was awarded 10 million naira each. So it's a total of 30 million naira each.
Reacting to the court rulings, human rights lawyers have also emphasized the need for the court to uphold the rights of its citizens in the face of abuses and the need to investigate wrongdoings.
It's significant to also send a signal to the Nigerian state that the issue of the protection of rights of citizens and the fundamental duty of states to protect the rights of citizens on all the international human rights instruments that we have ratified is something we cannot undermine. And again, it also expands, and that's very interesting for me when I read the considerations of the court. It also expands the spectrum of the fundamental rights that are valuable for citizens.
The ECOWAS Court also held that the internal panel set up by the respondent states to investigate the allegations of abuse at the Lekki toll gate lacked independence and was questionable. In Lagos for News Central, Adeshawa Odushoga.
We're now joined by News Central's digital news editor and team lead researchers, Abdulateef, Ahmed. Abdulateef, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Abdulateef, this is a very dicey one. The EndSARS story is one that is known too well by Nigerians and a lot of people across the globe because of that hashtag EndSARS. But I'm saying it's a dicey and interesting one because the ECOWAS has now charged the government to pay compensation to these persons. However, only a few days ago, our own president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was elected or re-elected chairman of the ECOWAS. So, how is this going to play out? Now, the first question I want to ask is, has there been any, do we know if there's been any response from Nigerian government to the statement made by ECOWAS? And if there hasn't been, how do you predict the government would respond to this?
First, I would say that this judgment is a landmark judgment for proponents of human rights in the country and on the continent, continent-wide. Why this is important is that it brings a closure to all the arguments, the sides that has been taken, by the security forces, the government officials, people who are concerned, people who lost their lives and the lives of their loved ones. So far, there has been no official response from the government. It is understandable that the government will want to study the judgment. There's hardly anything unclear about the judgment. So what the government would rather do is to give a response after studying it and understanding the best approach. Because you see, a judgment can be given and your response to that judgment will tell the world if you are looking to be, to learn from your mistakes or you are basically trying to be the big man. Now, most times when you try to be the big man, you end up incriminating yourself or the system. Just recently, we saw what happened in Kenya, where the bedlam across the country was high. People were saying the same thing across, the counties. But you have a president who wasn't listening. You have a parliament that wasn't listening. And people said, you know what? We are going to march against the government. People lost their lives. But at the end of the day, the voice of the people prevailed. It was avoidable if government were able to listen to what people were saying, if they were honest enough to engage with the concerns of the citizens.
I mean, well, this judgment is a good one, but it's just one step, considering everything that went down about 4 years ago. Now, one of the people who should be a recipient of this amount is one we know all too clearly, and that's someone who has been in hiding for about 4 years because she's scared for her life and she has been receiving death threats. This does not exactly guarantee her security, right? Coming back, I doubt she's even still, she's back in the country. Coming back into the country, her security is not guaranteed. So yes, there's a step to it. The government will definitely want to study the judgment and hopefully do the right thing. But does that guarantee the security, not just for her now, but even the other victims who were willing to speak up? Because a lot of them have complained about that fear for their lives. They don't feel that they're secure enough.
The judgment is one thing. Implementing the judgment is another thing. The paradox about Nigeria is in how people interpret judgments. You can have one judgment, but sometimes you need someone up there to say, you know what, this is what this judgment means. This is why. Sometimes the courts will issue straight, very explicit judgments, but you will see the police violating the judgment. You'll see DSS going against the judgment. You see government officials trying to rail against the judgment because they feel that nobody is going to hold them accountable. Yeah. When you have a situation like this, one thing you should understand is the fact that ECOWAS has, issued this pronouncement doesn't give any assurances to those who are concerned that when they come into the country, they may not be arrested. Let me tell you one of the reasons. We remember the case of Akuzu SARS, one notorious police officer who killed and continued to make money from the lives of innocent people. People who didn't face judgment, they were simply eliminated, and worst of all, their bodies were floating in the river. That man is still alive today. Yes. It is painful that the families have not gotten justice for these deaths. Let's even assume that the offenses for which these people were killed were punishable by death. Were they prosecuted? We didn't see that. None of that happened. It therefore means that there was a violation. And up to this moment, the fact that the person, the man who has been pointed as the culprit, as the person who was responsible for all of this, has not been prosecuted means that some people seem to be living above the law.
That's quite sad. And you know, still to piggyback on what you've just said now, we're looking at justice for certain persons, right? And there has to be trust as well. Is it possible? And if it is possible, how can it be possible? And I'm talking about the government regaining the trust of the people. Apart from EndSARS, there's so many things that have happened that has continued to, with every instance, right? It has continued to expand that trust gap between the people and the government, be it in economics, you know, in governance matters, in everything, and including this particular one too. So in seeking justice, right, how can it possibly ever be, can it be possible? How can, you know, the government ensure that this trust gap is reduced, that the people can begin to trust them? You know, can we ever get there? And if we can, how can the government facilitate this?
So we can get there. The moment government understands that governance is not you lording over the people, it's a contract between you and the electorate. What it means is that you begin to understand complaints not as hatred or an attempt to overthrow your government. So when people go out on the streets to protest, you should be the one telling the police to ensure that no property is destroyed, no life is lost, nobody is harmed. That way, people begin to understand that, okay, government is now willing to listen. Because before people will hit the streets, it means that they have exhausted almost every means of communication to the government. So if you want, you know, the masses to trust you, it is easy. You ensure that for every time the masses have announced that there's protest, go out there and protect them. You ensure that nothing is damaged, because sometimes hoodlums will hijack, you know, protest. And so it messes up the entire, you know, process, and then people begin to blame the protesters. No, the job of the government is security of lives and properties, regardless of the atmosphere, be it, you know, a tournament, a football or soccer or whatever it is. If it's, you know, a procession, you have to protect the lives and properties of people. That is one. Two, the commission of inquiries, you know, that listen to the victims and witnesses and all that, you can actually reopen the commission of inquiry, because now that we know something better than we used to know before, we can listen again for the purpose of reconciliation. Sometimes you do not listen to a problem and then close that chapter. You listen again for comprehension in order to make, you know, specific points so that you don't repeat the same mistakes. For instance, I don't expect that in another 10 to 15 years, another government comes into power and repeats the mistake of EndSARS. Because Nigerians will have learned better, to organize better, to probably wreak heavier havoc on the system. We've seen what happened in South Africa, where people were protesting for certain reasons, and then the economy was almost ruined. The same thing, you know, in Kenya. The cost of rebuilding the country after the protest of few weeks, you know, is enormous. For a country that is struggling with debts, struggling with its budget and all of that, you now have the anger of the people, you know, causing havoc. So we should learn from all of these things. It doesn't have to happen again before we learn all of these things. But the concerns, you know, I do not believe that all the concerns that were raised by the protesters during the EndSARS has been resolved completely. So we can open an inquiry and say, you know what, yes, we have, you know, reached some closure and all that, but now that we have this judgment, let's open it again and let's listen for comprehension for the future of this country.
Okay, very quickly, in 1 minute, Abdulateef, it's one thing to protect protesters and ensure that there are no security threats, but it's another thing to listen, and you mentioned listening, but my question is, how attainable is this? Because you talked about what happened in Kenya. The youth got very angry, marched on the streets, went on rampage, and literally almost burned down the parliament. And because of that, the president conceded. But how many times do we see, not just even Nigeria now, but across Africa, that presidents concede? There's this autonomy of rule that you cannot challenge the authority. The least they can do is come out and defend their actions. And even in that defense, they make you look more stupid. Like telling you that the reason they're buying more cars, I'm still very upset about that, is because of the bad roads. And you cannot, literally, you can't say anything, right? So are we ever going to get to a point where the people speak and the government listens and takes action based on what the people's... I mean, the Kenyan president did not just concede. When he heard that they were still going to stay on the street, he went ahead to organize a meeting on X and address them one-on-one. But here we see a lot of PAs and special advisors blocking the entrance, and we don't even have access to the person who claims to be leading us.
Voted in.
Yes.
The government, a lot of times in Nigeria, the government underestimates the sheer will of the average Nigerian. And I think they're testing the limits of stupidity. Why I say that is that when push comes to shove, a certain luck can run out, and then what you call giant of Africa will just become a banana republic, where nobody can be held. Nobody, okay, just some weeks ago, it was announced by the Nigerian customs authorities that there was a seizure of arms of about 270 million. Let's assume it got into Nigeria, and it got into the hands of people who are disenchanted with the government, and they organize, and they begin to eliminate people they feel are stumbling blocks, to their access to justice. What do? What does it take to eliminate, to squeeze the system? So they begin to assume that, okay, well, we have the soldiers, we have the policemen, we have the security agents. You risk a lot of things when you realize that you are fighting a lot of wars. You are fighting a lot against criminal gangs. You are fighting against drug lords. You are fighting against insurgents in Northeast. You are fighting against separatists in the Southeast. When something happens and connects all of these people who are disenchanted with the system, and you have protests about hunger because over 100 million Nigerians are living below $2 per day, people will tell you that their living or their debt does not matter anymore. Yeah. So at that point, no matter how much armory, determination, policing, you think you have, it will not make sense in the face of sheer anger. We saw it in Kenya. It is not because the Kenyan authorities do not have the arms, to quell all of these things. But how many people do you want to kill? Look at the voices, look at the faces of the masses, look at the voices and how they spoke in clear terms. And the international community is watching. So you can choose to become a pariah nation or to stick to what is agreeable between the masses and the leaders.
Well, thank you so much, Abdulateef, for breaking this down, because truly I'm sure that we haven't seen the end of this conversation. And again, as I mentioned in the beginning, because the president of Nigeria, the country in question, is the chairman of ECOWAS now. It makes it more, it makes it more interesting, actually. Yeah. So I'm really waiting to see what Nigeria's first response will be. But thank you so much once again, Abdulateef, for joining us on this conversation.
Thank you for having me.
All right, that's been the size of our show today. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Bernard Akede, and it's been an extreme pleasure hosting the show alongside.
Oh, you've been here twice. Congratulations. I'm blessings for Mosugu to have a lovely day.